Shivaya Gurave Satchidananda Muhurtaye Nishprapanjaya Shantaye Niralambaya Te Shase Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushtivatanam Urvaru Kamivabandhanan Mrityur Mukshya Mamrutat Om Shanti 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 Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Satchidananda Muhurtaye Nishprapanjaya Shantaye Nidalambaya Te Jase Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushtivatanam Urvadu Kamivabandhanan Mrityur Mukshya Mamrutat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. So here I am, mi nombre es Sally Kirkland, and with me tonight is Dee Nice, radio host. And tell me all the stations that you've worked at.
Woo! At numerous stations back in the K-Day days, from the K-Day days to Ace days to, man, KTYM. It just keeps going and going. And radio has been in my blood, and I love radio. We were talking about music that soothes the savage beast, and I know you had your tenure on radio. And whether it's talk or whether it's music, there's nothing more soothing than that airwave filling you with whatever it is that motivates you, that lets you just sit back and relax and say, I've arrived.
Right.
Take the stress.
Right.
And so it's a beautiful thing. And I am just so fortunate to be here with you tonight, because all the time I've seen you in the studio, I've heard you, I've heard of you, I've watched you. You've always been that gracious, gorgeous, and talk about the hardest working woman in show business. You epitomize that, because you're constantly working to this day. Do you ever stop?
Oh, I hope not.
That's what, when they say when you stop working, that's when it's over, correct?
That's when it's over, yeah, when you stop working. No, I don't plan to ever stop.
Right. And the big smile on your face tells me you enjoy life. You like what you're doing. You enjoy Sally Kirkland's life.
Yeah.
See, I love it.
I wouldn't mind Meryl Streep.
Right. But that's Meryl. But this is Sally Kirkland. Yeah. And going back, let's go back a little bit, because what we talked about earlier, interviews are interviews, but journeys are forever. And also being a minister that you are now, you understand that from life to death, when we leave here, the transitional period, it's a journey. And there's certain things when we first embark upon this journey that we sit there and say, what do I want to do? Once we find out who it is that we are, we then embark upon the next step of what do we want to do for the rest of our life. Whether it's something we're impassioned by or something that's really going to be that money maker, no matter what it is in somebody's life, it's got to make you feel good and makes you feel happy about it. And so let's go back a little bit on that first time Sally decided this is the life for me. Let's talk about that for a second.
Well, let's see. I guess I was 10 years old, and I went to a camp called the Valley Drama Camp. And I did my first acting, and I was very shy. So the ability to hide behind a character allowed me to express myself but not be me, because I was too shy to be me. And so I fell in love with acting at the age of 10. And then in pre-high school, I would be in the drama club. And then in high school, I was the president of the drama club. And I did not go to college. I went right off Broadway in New York when I was 17, and I've been doing it ever since. So it's been 58 years, I think.
Right, okay.
And it's been my life. And I got on a spiritual path. I mean, I was brought up going to church school, learning mathematics, English, whatever, science, in a church building.
Wow. And
going and sitting in the pews every morning and seeing Christ and St. Joan and St. Francis. And that was my life then. My father wanted me to be in a church school. And so Christ has always been a huge part of my life from when I was a little child. And I would go to Sunday school and I would know all the Bible stories. And then as I got older, I went away to school, and it was still Christ, but it stopped being high Episcopalian, nearly Catholic, and it became Protestant. And then when I got out of high school, I went through a period of losing my belief, of being an atheist. And that got me in trouble, and I had a nervous breakdown. And so, without going into a long story, I was pronounced dead, and I had a life after life experience. And there was Christ again, saying, well, you can stay here, or you can go back and tell your friends that the other side is as blissful as you found it. And so from that point on, 1966 on, even though I continued acting, I always had a spiritual path, which reminded me that the real purpose in being in life was to love people and to be of service to people. And acting was just something that I did to have a vocation, really. So is that an answer to your question?
Yeah, yes, it is. Now let's go back a little bit. When you first decided this is what I wanted to do at the tender age of 10, this was something that intrigued you, but now did you look at it and say, okay, I like more or less, although you used it as a per se mask, you said, or something to kind of get away from your shyness, there were still the different levels. There was the stage acting, there was a performance, there was a interpersonal, different ones. What helped you with that spiritual background? What was it that kind of grounded you somewhere and let you take that pathway? Because you said you did a little more, but which basically do you say was the most fulfilling that helped you with that undergrowth that you had in the church?
Well, at the time when I was younger, I didn't see how they came together.
Okay.
I had my very strong belief in Christ, and then I had my passion for acting, and it started off with stage.
Okay.
It didn't get to films until, well, I think Andy Warhol was my first director in 1964. Not really. I was directed in 1961. I can't remember the director's name. I believe Orson Welles had a part in the movie, but I didn't get to meet him.
Okay.
In 1962, 63, 64, I did features with little tiny parts. And then I met Andy in 1964, and he had a crush on my mother, who was fashion editor of Life, who did a story on him in Life magazine.
Wow.
And he put me in a movie called 13 Most Beautiful Women with Edie Sedgwick, who's quite famous, and Baby Jane Holzer, and Nico, the singer, and Ultraviolet, and all these Andy Warhol people. I considered myself the only overground actor. Everyone else was an underground actor. But I was a member of the Actors Studio, and I studied with Lee Strasberg, which gave me credibility in the real theater, you know. But Andy fascinated me, and I wanted to be part of what they called back then was happenings, a happening or a be-in.
Right.
And so it was all theater until the those early 60s. I did some film and some television. I think my first television show was Naked City with Nina Foch in the early 60s. I played her maid. And then as time went on, I got my first starring role in a film called Coming Apart with Rip Torn and Vivica Linford.
Right.
And that's the first time I saw my name on a marquee in New York City. And it was very ahead of its time. It was very R-rated. And yeah, it was pretty out there. And the Times called it 10 years ahead of its time or whatnot. And, the film Sex, Lives, and Videotapes, we did it back in the late 60s.
Wow.
You know, and then much later on, you know, you would see reflections of that. And in 1969, I had a nervous breakdown in 66, and I was searching for a path that would give me spiritual fulfillment, along with my belief in Christ. And I read a book called Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda, and he talked about being a yogi and Sanskrit and Hinduism in the same breath with the Christ consciousness.
Right.
And so he seemed to be putting it all together into a melting pot, that you could have the Christ consciousness and you could also be from India and China and Buddhism, Hinduism, all of this, and share the same unconditional loving for everybody. So it wasn't my church against your church. It was like we are all on this path if we choose to be. And so I became a yoga teacher in 1969 for Swami Satchidananda, who I feel Yogananda led me to with his book Autobiography of Yogi. And I taught many, many people hatha yoga, pranayama, breathing, and meditation. And then in 1973, I met an American man, John Roger, and he, at the time, he was called Sri John Roger, which is a Hindu thing. Sri, it's a way of honoring the guru. And I found him, and I thought, oh my God, this is my teacher for life.
Wow.
And he was reading my beads. You know, everything he was saying was like reading what was going on in my mind, and I couldn't believe that he knew that much about me. The first time I ever heard him speak, he was telling me everything that had happened to me in the past weeks and months. And I thought, oh my God, who is this person? And he was talking about the Christ consciousness with Eastern philosophy. And so I was home.
Right.
And I've been on that path for 40 years. And after this show, That Which Is with John Roger plays on this network. So if you're curious what I've been into for 40 years, you can check it out right after this show here on Channel 36. And we work on something called soul transcendence, and graduating this lifetime, learning all our lessons this lifetime so we don't have to reincarnate in human pain. We can get it all right and not create any negative karma for ourselves. Please, God, please, please, no more negative karma. And what I love that he said was, no soul is lost. And I had never heard that when I was being brought up. You know? So I thought, wow, this is home. This man is saying no soul is lost. Out of God comes all creation. And so that really blew my mind and continues to blow my mind. And so there were various initiations and then an ordination that took place in 1976 where he ordained me as the Reverend Sally Kirkland. I still had my Hindu name of Satya that I got with Swami Satchidananda. So I came into this path with John Roger, having already been on this other path, which was, like I said, Hinduism and the Christ consciousness together. And Swami Satchidananda said that he named me Satya because it stood for truth. In Sanskrit, it means truth. And that I should study Gandhi and his life. And what was called the Satyagraha, which is the truth forces, as he walked down the street with the British soldiers coming at him with no guns, no arms, just truth. And the love that truth and love really mean the same thing. And so I've been on this path all these years, and I don't think I could be in the film industry, television, without this path. Because it's extremely up and down, up and down. A lot of rejection along the way. And so I go back to the movement of spiritual inner awareness, and they say, well, we have this service project over here, will you do it? And I say, oh yes, I can do something for somebody to help somebody else and not think about that rejection I just went through. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Because I see now with the rooted and grounded part of you first starting out in the church, it kept you rooted and grounded. Because when it was time to come back to it, it came back. But then when you started your other endeavors, your other enlightening studies, then you found something that paralleled, but you said, here's a deeper truth. You said that no soul is lost. That got you. Well, on the other aspect of it, then we know the other aspect of it shows where souls do get lost along the way some way.
When I was younger, I was convinced that I was going to go to hell with all the things I thought I did. and so really confused me, all the heaven and hell stuff. And so when he started talking about out of God comes all creation and no soul is lost, John Roger, that really was meaningful to me, because like I said, I had a nervous breakdown with my confusion with my upbringing, and bless his soul, but my father was a racist, and he fired my African-American nurse, who I loved more than anybody. Why? Because she was black, and I thought that was absolutely sadistic. And I thought, wait a second now, you're an usher in a church for 30 years, you put me in church school, and you're saying that this is what to do during segregation times. So my mother and I wanted to go live with Louise and leave him by himself. So I was very confused, because he was the one that wanted me to go to church and put me in church school, and then he acted that way, and it was so hypocritical, very tough on me, and so I didn't know where to turn in that moment in 1966.
And so sometimes we need that adversity that kind of shakes us up and gives us another outlet to look towards. And fortunately, it gave you the outlet for the Enlightenment, which seems to illuminate with you. Every time I see you, that light around you, and you speak the light and the truth, because you saw a different way. You saw the truth. And so now, with you going back into where, let's go back for a second, into the acting world, which is really facade upon facade, depending on what the writers and directors put together. It's something that's built upon a story. And you still have got to embody that to make it real.
I feel like I've had about 100 lifetimes in this lifetime. There's been over 100 characters. I don't know how many, hundreds of characters, hundreds and hundreds, over 200 films, and 80 plays, and over 1,000 hours of episodic television or whatnot. So playing all these women with different situations and different hurts and different joys, it's it's quite a life. But Anna, the film that I got nominated for the Oscar and I won the Golden Globe. My name is Anna Rokova. I come from Prague, Czechoslovakia. What you want? I don't want to talk about my personal life. You give me the script. I act for you. That's a little bit of Anna. That was so exciting to be able to completely go from being an American woman to being a Czechoslovakian, still an actress, but a Czechoslovakian actress. And I would go to the film festivals where it was showing, and people would come up to me and say, your mother's Czech. I said, no. Your father's Czech. No. But surely you have some relatives who are Czech. And I'd say, no, I'm American, maybe Scotch-Irish heritage, but that's just something that's part of my craft, you know. That was really exciting when Czechs themselves wanted to own me, wanted to think of me as one of them. And the Poles also. It was written by a Polish writer, Agnieszka Holland, and directed by Polish Jurek Bagajewicz, and cinematography, Polish-American Bobby Bukowski, and co-starred with Czechoslovakian Paulina Porizkova. So Eastern Europe really gave me my career in a way. And I'm happy to say that within a year after we did the film, the walls came down in Czechoslovakia and Poland. I like to think that was my fantasy.
Exactly.
And it came true.
Coming true, Now, I know that there were other actresses that you were working with, that you had seen before, you had heard before. Was there anybody that stood out?
Shelley Winters.
Okay, all right.
Shelley Winters I met when I was about 18, and because my mother worked so hard at Life magazine, 24 hours, she took me under her wing, and we called her my godmother. And she was my mentor. She had me teach her all her lines. I taught her lines for Poseidon Adventure and Patch of Blue and all of these films that she got Oscars or Oscar nominations for. And Diary of Anne Frank. And she taught me about dramedy, that when the audience thinks they're going to laugh, make them cry. When they think they're going to cry, make them laugh. Which was profound, because I never learned that from Lee Strasberg. It took Shelley Winters to teach me that. And then I went on to teach close to 2,000 people over 35 years, all over this country and in Australia and Europe. And I would always teach them about dramedy. About, you got to have the comedy and the drama very close, so the audience doesn't quite know what's going to happen next, because it's so human that it's both. You know, when you do comedy, you don't play for the laughs.
Right.
You play for the drama, and the lines are funny, it'll come out funny, but you can't do yuck comedy. You know?
Right.
So that was a huge learning for me. I admired very much Ingrid Bergman, and when she did Joan of Arc, that combined my spiritual path with acting, because Joan of Arc was such a saint. She held the light for her dispensation.
Right.
So when I saw Ingrid Bergman play Saint Joan, I thought, wow, if I could only do that, if I could only act and at the same time believe in God that much on camera, you know. And I got a chance to do that in a film called The Haunted, where I played a Catholic woman who had entities in her life, and she kept asking the Catholic Church to come do a house blessing and get rid of the entities.
Right.
And they kept coming and saying there was nothing there, and she kept saying, but there are, and there were, if you believe in what goes on in the other realms that we can't maybe see, but there were dark forces at play. And I got to pray a lot in that.
Wow.
And my teacher, John Roger, came on the set and he said, this story about this people in Pennsylvania took place on the land where the coal mines were, many people died in the coal mines tragically, and some of the souls didn't get to the other side. They were, and so there were a lot of trapped souls.
Wow.
And so that part of the country, there was a lot of darkness.
Right.
And so for somebody who really believed in God, you know, it was like the battle between the light and the dark forces. And I got to, in that part, which got a Golden Globe nomination for me, I got to really, really pray my little heart out to get rid of these negative forces.
Right.
That was very exciting. And I loved doing The Sting with Bob Redford and Paul Newman.
Right.
Redford got me the part. And it was just his birthday yesterday, I think. And I loved doing Revenge with Kevin Costner, playing a very sexy woman.
Right.
I loved doing Bruce Almighty, even though it was a small part, with Jim Carrey, because I just worshiped Jim Carrey. And he just had us laughing all the time, on set, off set. But he's a very spiritual person. He meditates every day.
Right.
And in one scene, which didn't end up in the movie, the tears were streaming down my face. And when the tears were streaming down my face, then tears started streaming down his face. And he took my hands and he brought me over to this table in the cafe that we were shooting in. And he just looked at me like, you know, we're both on this journey, to use your word. Yeah, Jim Carrey's incredible. Ron Howard was an extraordinary director. I got to play Matthew McConaughey's mother and Woody Harrelson's mother, and be a Texan. And they were always trying to tease me and goof me up, and Matthew and Woody. And Ron was just amazing with actors. Being an actor himself initially, you know, he really knows how to communicate with actors. I had an extraordinary time with Oliver Stone directing JFK. I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning of the movie, there's this car coming down this old Texan road, and this woman is thrown out of the car, and she's screaming, "You fucking asshole!" And then the next thing you know, Jack and Jackie Kennedy are coming off a plane, and then you hear this hysteria going on, and my character is being wheeled in the hospital with bandages around my head and screaming, "The president's going to be assassinated!" on in front of the doctors and the press and whatnot. So what was her name? Rose. I can't remember her last name right now. She worked for Jack Ruby, but she was the first person to tell the authorities about the assassination before it came true. And then they made sure that she died before she was able to get in court and testify. Rose Shirami, something like Shirami, Joe Shirami. And that was exciting. Oliver Stone filmed in 8mm, 16, and 35 all at the same time. Color and black and white all at the same time. And I asked him if we could shoot the rehearsal. So what you see in JFK, was the rehearsal that we shot.
Wow.
Only he and I knew what we were going to do. The other actors didn't know.
Wow.
So it was quite an amazing moment.
Well, you've always been an outstanding woman. The spirit that you carry with you, you know, beautiful as you were coming through and dealing with all these different actors and personalities, being spiritually centered, but dealing with all these different impressions that you have around you. Because I know as an actress, you're affected by actors around you in some way. Now, out of all of them that you've been with great men in theater and in film, who would you say was one of your most enlightening ones that you've run into that really stand out? Give us a little something on that one.
Well, two of my favorite mentors and friends, haven't seen them too much lately, but grew up with, so to speak, in the business. And one was not an actor, he's a singer, but he affected me totally my whole life, from when I met him when I was 20, I think. Bob Dylan.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he inspired me so much with all of his social consciousness and standing up for the little guy and just telling the truth through his songs. And here he is, 75, going from city to city to city to country to country to country, singing the truth. And the other, I got to be in a play that Shelley Winters wrote called One Night Stands of a Noisy Passenger. And not only did I have Shelley, but I had Robert De Niro.
Wow. And
Diane Ladd was in that. And those were very important people in my life. And yeah, I'd say men-wise, Robert De Niro and Bob Dylan.
Now, directors. I know you've worked with some great ones. What would you say is the most memorable experience?
Well, because he gave me such a love letter, Jörg Bagajevich for Anna, Polish director, and I think Ron Howard, just so loving and respectful to me. My audition was 45 minutes long. He allowed me 45 minutes to take chances and just work for him. And we only have a minute left, so now what do you want to say about you?
Well, I'm inconsistent because, like I said, although I love my radio, there's nothing like turning on the television and watching somebody that embodies the realism. Now, what do you take away from all that? Where do we see Sally in 5 years?
Oh, I don't know. Let that be a surprise.
Ooh, you heard it first. So I'm so glad to have come in and been able to sit down with you, because you are such an illumination. You're such a light. And I look forward for that to be passed on to generations, and one day we'll sit back and they'll have a statue in every coast to you.
No, thank you, Daryl.
You've been a blessing, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of your world tonight.
God bless you.
God bless you.
And God bless you all out there. Oh.